This podcast is owned and operated by the RCR Association, a private third party to the Department of National Defense. The content of this podcast is the responsibility of the RCR Association and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Government of Canada. The official emblems of the regiment are used with the permission of Regimental Headquarters, the RCR.
Got the professionals. Hey, Sergeant Singh, how are you?
Good morning, sir. I'm doing well. How you doing?
Good. Now, are you in Petawawa?
Yes, sir. I'm over upstairs at 3RCR at the Officers and Senior TO's Rest Easy. So just a quiet space to record while the battalion's getting ready for the Soldiers Appreciation Dinner.
Excellent. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been in the 3RCR building, but good to see you.
Yeah, sir. I'm interested to hearing about your story and a bit of your journey from where you started and how you ended up where you are. First of all, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. This is a very extraordinary, rare opportunity to have the time to sit down with somebody at your level and position. And I'm very fortunate to have your time. So with that being said, sir, can you just tell us what you do?
Sure. No, so first of all, Sergeant Singh, thanks to you and the podcast. This is a wonderful opportunity. I'm here in Ottawa at National Defense Headquarters, and so my contact with troops is not too often. I do get up to Petawawa from time to time, and when I'm invited up there, and it's usually for change of command and stuff like that. But here in Ottawa, I'm in an organization called Assistant Deputy Minister Policy. What the hell's policy? It's about government decision making. So, the government, we're in a democracy. And so we, the military, just don't get to decide what to do. We have to have elected officials that tell us how to do that. And it's not always the minister pointing at the army commander going, hey, do this. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's memorandums to cabinet because you need resources. That all sounds horribly boring. But it involves a lot of engagement with the other parts of government, the central parts of government, the other parts of defense, because the Army is one of many, many parts of the organization. And I'm something that's called the Director General International Security Policy. So I have a couple of different jobs, which include just being a staff officer here in Ottawa and making sure that, CDS does what the minister directs her to do. If she gets the resources, if she hasn't got the authorities to do stuff, let me help her get that. Equally, because I got international in my title, I'm responsible for our defense relations worldwide. And so I do a lot of travel, which is cool because I guess my kids are out of the house now, so that's not so bad. But I'm about to do my 5th time into the Indo-Pacific this year. It's just an example of going there because there's a lot of allies we got to talk to and make sure that we're all connected. And then equally here in town, there's a lot of defense attaches from different countries around the world, and I kind of rally them together, communicate with them, what's going on. And that's everything from the United States of America, who are a neighbor and best friend, to China. I talk to the Chinese defense attaché very frequently because we have some troublesome relations. We're trying to maintain good mill. And as you know, when you don't talk, sometimes you shoot each other. And we, of course, we don't want us shooting it back and forth. And indeed, we do a lot in the Indo-Pacific. We have a lot of ships there. Have a lot of Army folks doing stuff. We have our SOF colleagues going in there doing some things. And indeed our teammates from the Air Force. And they interact with the Chinese, and we just got to make sure that's all done professionally, safely. So that's just kind of part of what I do. And then last of all, I get to be the guy that sits on the Regimental Senate. And so the senior serving Royal Canadian is now my buddy, Lieutenant General Pete Scott. Now, he hangs out in Naples, in Italy, in Joint Forces Command Naples, part of NATO, and he's kind of busy. So, and he's equally 6 hours ahead right now, something like that. So he doesn't have either a lot of time to get involved in regimental business, although I communicate with him regularly. I kind of treat him like my boss. Hey, this is what I'm up to. You good? And then equally, he does, he's in a different time zone. So trying to keep him connected to regimental stuff is a bit of a challenge, but he tries to stay connected. And so I'm in the head of the Regimental Senate, and therefore I'm able to do a lot of work to try to make sure the Senate and the regimental structure moves forward on what we need to do to serve soldiers, officers, retired folks, all the different parts of the regiment, so that it gives us what we need.
Sir, can you tell us, especially for all the the soldiers out there who are not familiar with what the Senate does and its purpose, can you just tell us about its why it's important and what does it do?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, like, first of all, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I am the guy that's got his finger on the tactical pulse of what's going on in the battalions. I've said that many times because I last served in 3RCR in 2006 as OC Mike Company Para, and then I went into SOF, so I commanded in SOF, and then off I went to other stuff. And so I wasn't a brigade commander like in Petawawa, so my contact with like Royal Canadians tends to be a bit more limited. But I do understand, I think, fairly well what's happening in Ottawa. And so the Senate sits atop the regimental structure, which has four parts. Number one is the serving component, and that's the one I would expect most soldiers to be more accustomed to. That's the battalions, that's the battle school, members serving around outside of regimental employment, but still doing good work on behalf of Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces. They're out there serving, but we equally have 4RCR. We have reservists all over the place doing great work. And so that is the serving component. And again, perhaps the bigger one, I don't know. I actually haven't checked the numbers. But it is definitely the one we kind of tend to spend more attention on. And that's led by the Regimental Executive Committee, REC. That's Colonel Guinea, that everybody should know up in Petawawa. So he's running that place. We also have the association, retired folks, and I want to talk more about that one because someday you're going to go, okay, this is enough serving stuff. My body's tired, or I got other things going on. Family wants me and that's well understood. And I hope most people will want to continue to like stay in contact with the association, and that is the association is all the retired folks, and there are chapters across Canada, around the world to a certain extent. That just try to, inform everybody, get together so you can spill beer on each other, tell lies about who had the harder whatever, phase, exercise, etc. That's the retired folks. And I think it's tremendously important. And indeed, I know they're doing a lot of work on it. Acton Kilby, for those that know, retired Colonel Acton Kilby's in charge of that right now. And I think he's doing a lot to see how can we continue to modernize that organization. Because what us older, more mature members want to do might not be exactly the same as what, somebody that does a basic engagement, retires as a corporal, let's say, and it's not going to be the same thing. Kids these days don't think and interact the way I do. And so how do you give everybody what they want to still stay in contact, how they want to do as much, get very, very engaged because that's what they want to do, or just go, well, I'm just happy to get a newsletter once in a while. How do you do that? And so I think that's tremendously important. The other stuff that maybe doesn't get as much attention is the other two parts of the regiment, which number one is the trust. And so we have a fair bit of money. People contribute to it, but it's in a trust. So it's not a giant bank account that I definitely could go, hey, I want some of that money because I got a cool idea. It's a trust, which means we make interest off those deposits. And usually they're very specifically focused towards whoever put that money there. It could be for full dress uniform, maintenance, stuff like that. It's very specifically focused. Nevertheless, it's there. And I think if we, the regiment, said, we'd like to do something else, we could use that money. We could actually raise some money, get some money there, and then get after something that we thought was really important. So that's our money. And then the last of all is the museum. Hopefully, many people have had a chance to either physically visit the museum down in London at Wolseley Barracks, or virtually. There's a fairly good presence as well. And they're doing excellent work. I'm a closet historian. I read a lot of history, and I think it's important. I think it's important to kind of keep soldiers of today attached to their past and realize you are part of something that's bigger than yourself. And, you personally are important and your contribution is important, but you have over 100 years of history behind you of equally soldiers, officers, tons of great work, and you are part of that heritage. And you stand on the shoulders that went before you. And so as you stand doing domestic ops in Canada, or you're in Latvia right now, or you just did some type of big deployment in trying to help people out in the Middle East and the Mediterranean, went to Sudan, you are standing on the shoulders of those before you. And what you're doing right now is part of our history, our living history. So I think it's tremendously important. And that's what the museum does. And we, of course, it's a little bit physically displaced from the majority of the regiment because most people are in Gagetown. We got a large crew, obviously, most are in Petawawa. We got a good crew in Gagetown and others scattered across Canada. We don't have the presence in London that we used to, but they're there, and I would really encourage everybody to stay in contact with their history like that. So those are the 4 different parts of the regiment, and I kind of sit up on top there with others to look at where we're going. And just to speak very quickly, I just say that it's not about looking at like what's going on in battalions right now. There's a chain of command, and they're going to make sure that you shoot, move, communicate, and think the best you can, and professional development, like that stuff's going to happen. It's not that I'm worried about. Number 1 is this boring term, which is called governance. How do we structure ourselves? What does everybody do? Because everything I just described, I had to learn in this job. I didn't know that's how that worked. I didn't know there was 4 parts. I just thought the regiment is the serving component. Yeah, I guess people retire. They do stuff. And I suppose I've been to the museum, but I understood all this stuff. Well, you have to govern that properly. So I don't step on the toes of Colonel Guinea or Colonel Retired Kilby. Like they have their thing to do. I have mine. So that's a part of it. But equally is looking more institutionally. And by that, I mean, what's a favorite bugbear of mine? So I speak French. Spanish isn't great, but I speak a couple languages, and they're tools. And I've served in NATO for a few years. And for anybody that's ever been to Europe and bumped into a European that speaks like 5 languages, you're like, damn, that's really cool. They can just wander around, and language is no barrier to them because they can just speak it. And we only have 2 in Canada. And again, now with, I think the regiment looking more like Canada, there are people that speak languages that were raised in their family, and I really hope they keep them because I think that's hugely important, and I think it's an enabler for us because languages are a tool. But, we are a country that has come up with English and French, and damn it, it's only 2 languages. So, like, I know it's tough. I had to learn French once, but I married a French chick, got some French kids. So, like, I speak it very frequently, and definitely you do here. It's really useful. And it's a tool around the world. Well, again, it's great for me to say that, but, if you're just a young soldier, young officer, and we go, you young man, young lady, you've got a future. And we don't want you to be stopped by your language skills, because I'll tell you, I know the officer side better. You can be the awesomest commanding officer in the world, but once you're done being a lieutenant colonel and they want to promote you colonel, they expect some pretty robust language skills out of you. And so,
sir, can I ask you?
Sorry. Yeah, please go.
With the bilingual military that we serve in, and we understand the importance of how language is essentially like an asset to the military. How come we just don't go completely bilingual?
Yeah, well, I don't know how your French is, Sergeant. How is it? No?
I really wish I took it more seriously in high school, but I do not have a skill in it. Well, I am dating a French girl, so I am trying to strategically tackle this.
Okay. Yeah, I say jokingly to my wife, I got to really work on my Spanish, and I don't think I'm going to get Spanish girlfriend in this episode. I don't have the energy anyways. But all that to say is, I commanded the Canadian Special Operations Regiment. We did a lot of looking at language skills because they're important, but it's a capability.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I say, I don't know, I want you to be a parachute instructor, you know what that means. You got to go get your basic para. You might do JM stuff. You got to do P. There is a lot of work behind that. French to me is like that. So I don't know if you have your basic jump wings from a French perspective. Maybe, maybe not. You might jump out of a plane once or twice from a French perspective. You got a lot of work to do, and you got to maintain it. War story. I went to, I came out of military college pretty bilingual.
What year?
Yeah, sure. Make me say that. 1993.
Wow. I was born in 92, so I was, sir.
Okay, well, a bit better. Okay, so yeah, I showed up to 1RCR Bravo Company in 1993. Cool, up in Petawawa. Not a lot of French up in Petawawa. So there for a year and a half, and then deployed to Croatia. And back then, Croatia wasn't a NATO member. It was part of the former Yugoslavian republics, and we were serving in a zone of separation between the Croats and the Croatian Serbs, who were not getting along. So Blue Beret, super cool. So there, actually, Serbo-Croat was pretty handy. Spoke a little bit of German because I took a little bit of that in school. That was pretty handy. No French. And then the Van Deus showed up to replace us. And I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I'm like, that's funny because I'm bilingual. And it took me a week and a half of speaking to these dudes that I knew from military college. going, yeah, I got to be able to speak French again. So it really showed to me how perishable language skills are if you don't use them. So number one, we got to give you those skills, and then you got to maintain them. And that is a heavy lift. And like, I think in a English battalion, it's important because someday we're going to want you to be the Canadian Armed Forces Chief Warrant Officer. And if you're not bilingual, sorry, ain't going to happen. But at the same time, you doing the shoot, move, communicate, think stuff, professional development, everything else we expect of you, that's a lot. So I've created that into a line of effort. And, we're working on is there other ways we can help people? And again, I know you're busy in battalion, but I've learned Spanish okay off Duolingo. It's like, if I get 10 minutes a night, that's super cool. I think people could do that to extent. There's Babbel. I'd even like to see, how can the association get involved? Because who knows who's connected with somebody that can teach the language. We could do something informally. It's great to say, I'm going to send you on a year-long. You come out, hey, not bad with somewhat of a good profile. And then we send you to Gagetown for 5 years, and you come back and go, well, I didn't use it. So we have to start over again. So it's a heavy lift. I'd really like to see us be imaginative of how we can do it. But that's kind of the institutional level stuff that I try to focus on, because again, you don't need me telling you what the next C7 mod is or what the shoot, move, communicate stuff is. That's a chain of commands job. But up at the regimental level, I try to bring together those 4 parts and then talk about things like bilingualism, professional development. I think thinking about the future, there is a war going on in Ukraine with drones using AI, changing every day. And what are we learning from that? It just happened in Syria at the time of our talk here. Syria just flip-flopped again with another completely different regime. How did that happen? What did we learn from it? What did Israel just do as they were in Gaza? That would be great to be able to write an article or whatever kids do these days, Substack, podcast. There's a lot of way to communicate that. And how can we, the fancy word is incentivize it, give you a reward? I don't know, $10,000, a yearly award of $10,000 to the regiment. We'd have to find the money, raise the money, and that's serious. So if you've got a wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, whatever, and you say, listen, I'm going to really put some work into this. I have a really cool idea based on how I think we should do something better. I'm going to put it in my Substack. And if I win this, that's $10,000. We're going on holiday together. That would be serious. It's not $20, oh, sorry, $20 isn't worth my time. 10,000, 5,000, whatever. That's serious stuff. That's the kind of stuff that, again, we need to engage across the regiment. Yes, I expect the serving component. We've got tons of super smart associates, people in the association that have served, that have ideas. The trust can provide money. The museum can get involved. How do we do that kind of stuff that is not, again, day-to-day shoot, move, communicate, but how can we think about our profession and how can we as a regiment help you do that?
That's very interesting, and that's awesome, sir. That kind of idea is an incentive to want to promote the growth for the future and evolving the organization, I would imagine, with the potential of what that can be like. Is that something that gets spoken about where you work, about creating incentives for the future of helping grow the Army in a new direction?
So again, I'm in a part. I technically work for the Deputy Minister, not for the Chief of Defence Staff. That's my current job. So I know the Army Commander. I use my boss in Canadian Forces Intelligence Command for a while. I'm not exactly sure. He's a new guy as the Army Commander, all fired up, doing stuff.
He was my task force commander too.
Okay, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Anyways, I have lots of stories about General Wright and I over the years. But all that to say is that I'm focused from a regimental perspective. If there's other regiments want to get involved in this someday, great. But for now, there's a couple of lines of effort that we are discussing at regimental level, very heavily involving the serving component, but with the association involved. We need the trust involved because I think there's money involved in this. And that's just one thing. Communications. I think there's been a lot of work done on that, whereby, again, how do people communicate today is not the same. I can remember back in the day, you'd see some newsletter sitting on a table somewhere in some room or down by the QM or something like that. That's not how people communicate anymore. Kids these days are on TikTok or Snapchat. I don't even know all this stuff. I know my kids tell me that Facebook is for old people. But there's got to be different ways that we can communicate effectively. And again, across all of the regiment. I'm not just talking to the people in battalion, but what about the association? You got older folks there, like far older than me, that still want to know what's going on. How do we communicate with them? How do we get the trust? How do we get the museum involved in all that? I think that's the important stuff. And like communication really enables anything else we're going to do. Because if we can talk to all the parts of the regiment that want to be involved, retired folks are like, yeah, I'd still like to know what's going on. I might get involved from time to time. How do we get every element of the battalions knowing? So like if soldiers want to get involved, they can get involved. I think that's another big thing that we really have to look at. And if someday bigger parts of the Army or the Canadian Armed Forces want to get in on some of that, I think that'd be great.
Well said, sir. So when you clicked your survey response, you said you wanted to discuss the regiment, the future, and evolving the institution. And these are like three big kind of areas we can discuss. And if you are interested in getting into it, can we talk about what you meant in terms of describing the future? I know you talked about communication here. Is there anything else? Because I know communication is a big deal. And we're trying to achieve that with this podcast as a form of it.
Yeah, so I'll try to talk about some more exciting stuff, but I'll pepper in some less exciting stuff. Less exciting stuff. I'll go back to governance. So we recently put together a bylaw, which is basically saying this is how the Regimental Senate, that big piece over the top, that's how it's going to function. It took a little bit of work. We had to make sure it aligned again with the serving component and the association and the trust and the museum. And now we're working through those other parts. Colonel Guinea is working to say that the Regimental Executive Committee that represents the serving component, they'll get a bylaw too. So that will tell them this is how we govern ourselves. And equally, you probably know that Lieutenant General retired Peter Devlin, our colonel of the regiment, he recently was appointed. We recently did a parade in Petawawa. It was a great ceremony. And he is a very involved gentleman. He retired from the Army commander quite a few years ago, as a matter of fact, not to date the general. He is the president of a college in Southern Ontario in London. He's on multiple boards of directors. And so he has maintained great leadership. And I'm talking to him about, I'd love to learn from you. And indeed, how Regiment, Senate, and REC and the association should be conducted is kind of like a board of directors, which I know that's kind of boring stuff. But that will set our organization to focus on the right stuff, look to the future. So it's not like today, what's whatever section doing, but 5-10 years from now, setting us up for success by enabling people in language or looking at professional development, making sure we're constantly looking at how we communicate and indeed engage with Canadians. It's not our job to go around and get political. You and I are apolitical, but Canadians should know what their military is doing and care about it. And we're seeing that. Like increasingly, as you may know, we're going to spend 2% of Canada's gross domestic product on defense. That's a lot of money. I'm no expert, but I think our gross domestic product is somewhere around $3 trillion, which is about $3,000 billion. And so 2% is something like $60 billion. And that's a lot of money. And quite rightly, you and I as taxpayers should care tremendously what we're doing about that. And I think they should think about us when they do that. Like, this is what the Royal Canadian Regiment is doing to contribute. And quite frankly, anytime I get to talk to Canadians, or sometimes I testify here in Ottawa before parliamentary committees just to keep them up to date on what we're doing. And when I tell them of the good work that we, the Canadian Armed Forces, are doing, they're amazed. They're so thankful for the great work that's going on. And whether that is somebody that's about to go to Latvia for the 4th time, we're now going up to a brigade, recently did a brigade exercise there. That's fabulous. And they'd really like to hear it. And I'd like to see us communicate that better. But that's about a matter of informing Canadians on what we're doing. I think those kind of things, they're long-term, they're institutional, but if we can communicate as a regiment that way, and we can talk about things like professional conduct. You know very well there has been some problems in the Canadian Armed Forces, and indeed, general officers and flag officers were well known for some of their indiscretions. And that's something we got to fix, and we're working on it still. But that has to focus all the way down. Those generals someday, once upon a time, were young officers, and somehow they thought certain kind of conduct was inappropriate or was appropriate. And equally, what's happening day to day in battalions and schools and in the reserves, we all have to be professional. And let's be frank, at the same time, young men, young women, young men, young men, young women, they're going to connect at work. And indeed, I am from that romantic term, a service couple. My wife was a nurse. I met her in Petawawa at the officers' mess a couple years ago. And all that to say is they're going to connect. And so as long as they do that professionally, I guess we'll say, that's all good. That's how life is. But at the same time, how do we make sure that we create a culture? We create a situation in the unit, the company, the platoon, the section you're in, that if you see something like that where somebody says inappropriate, sexually, racially, you go, whoa, no, we don't talk like that here. And you sort that out quick. That's the kind of place that I think we as a regiment would like to demonstrate leadership. We don't pass a fault, and we wouldn't want to pass a fault in those kind of places too. And so that is equally, for me, part of the institution. We need to represent, and I don't want, of course, we have a CDS that tells the Army commander what to do, and it comes down to us in our battalions. But at the same time, I fully expect someday the CDS go, wow, I've seen what the RCR is up to, and that's really cool. You're right, you're being leaders about that stuff. And that's the kind of thing that I think we should take the leadership on. Whether it's, again, second language, professional development, professional conduct, that is all about us thinking institutionally. And if you've got great ideas on other stuff, because trust me, I'm not the smartest dude here, nor am I the person that knows what's happening in the battalions, in the reserves, amongst the retired folks. If there's other areas that we need to focus on, did you say regiment should be doing that? Bring it on, pass that information up, especially if you've got an idea and you want to start pushing it. I'm all about that because succession planning is another aspect. I'm going to probably move on this summer to something else, super cool. Somebody's got to come in and replace me. Sorry, Sergeant, someday somebody's going to replace you. I know it's going to be hard, but you got to prepare that. You got to dig that trench and make sure the trench is better for the next person than what you got. And so that's another part of us looking forward and making sure those in the regiment that come next, well, they're standing on our shoulders, not falling into the hole that we accidentally dug for them.
That's well said, sir. And with that being said, I would like to take a short break. We'll come back and I would like to talk about the changes in culture that you've noticed over the years. And I would like to talk about some of the things I've noticed as well. So we left off talking about culture. And I did want to come back to asking you, what would you say are big changes in culture you've noticed from your time serving since you've joined the military in 1993 to where you're at now in your career? Being in the regiment, I should say, being in the regiment.
Yeah. So culture is interesting, and again, for all the sociologists out there that are going to critique me on all this stuff, culture, kind of how we think about ourselves, what right looks like if you can. And so that's how I take culture. And I think it's actually important. And every soldier and officer out there should think of themselves as a leader. And so culture and work culture, if you want to call it that, is about how we think about ourselves. And so if you run an organization that's a get after it kind of place, then you're going to see your soldiers fired up and we do stuff here. We get her done. And I don't care how hard the job is. This is the section, platoon that's going to get it done. If that's how you want it to, that's how you want your organization as a leader. And equally, if you're whoa, we get tasked way too much. And so we're just going to be a chill kind of, we'll do what we're told to do, but nothing more. That infects your entire organization. So that's a culture. And it's important to me because here, so I have a very mixed force. I got some officers, but I equally have a lot of public servants. And these are high functioning, all got post-grad, tremendous writers, strategic thinking, representing Canada. Last time I counted on my floor, we had 18 languages from Bengali to Arabic and Hebrew. It was it's an amazing group. And, I try to portray my culture of high energy, get it done. We do stuff here. And sometimes I've had people not very happy with that kind of stuff. But when I bring people in, particularly on the military side, they don't like being told what to do by young people. They don't want to, like, they thought this was sort of more of a retirement kind of place. And they go, this isn't right. This isn't like, well, you're critiquing me because this organization represents what I think right looks like. So that's culture. So, like I said, number one, and it's sad, but sexual misconduct is something that in the last 5 years became very prominent. And just to be very clear, I don't think this is a military exclusive problem. I think there are organizations across the world, across Canada, that have cultural challenges like that. But we work for Canadians, and they should quite rightly expect the very best of us and us to represent them around the world, indeed in Canada. And more importantly, damn it, this is my organization. And in my organization, in our organization, we treat each other professionally. And so, young men, young women, whatever, like I said, you're going to meet people at work. But you got to do it professionally. And anything that is like sexually inappropriate, racially, whatever it is, that's not an organization anybody wants. And if that's how you were raised, well, that's not how we do it here. And if you can't learn that, well, then you should find somewhere else to work that'll allow it. But here we treat ourselves professionally. And it's unfortunate we kind of lost our way like that. Because and just in case it sounds like it's only senior officers in Ottawa that have a problem, I've seen the previous statistics and there's stuff happening all the time. Now, sometimes it's related to alcohol. So I think there was much more of a drinking culture even a while ago. I think alcohol was even promoted, encouraged, perhaps. I think it's less so now from what I've seen. Excuse me, I've raised 2 young people. Drinking's not as much of a thing. You tend to learn about it. It's fine. As you grow up, you got to learn about how you treat individuals. As a kid, you hit each other, and then you learn, that's not how we treat each other. And then probably, as you become sexually active, you're like, that's not how you treat each other. And you learn how to do that in life. And you learn about alcohol and legal drugs, and you probably figure out what you like to do and what you're not comfortable with. And so I think in the past, we regimentally, as part of the bigger army, were probably fairly encouraging of alcohol, definitely not drugs. Now, obviously, certain types of drugs are legal for use under certain restrictions. That's changed. I think, for the better. Quite frankly, drinking your face off and then trying to show up for PT the next morning is like, wow, man, I saw you totally drunk last night. Now you still did the run. That was like, well done. Like, I'm not sure why, but that was kind of considered kind of cool, right? I think that's really good if it's changed. I think equally, we as an entire force weren't as educated or skilled. You probably joined at 16, 18, whatever it was, first job ever. I think that's changed. We get a lot more mature people come in, got a lot of cool skill sets that we should embrace and try to figure out how we can employ. And equally, you tend to arrive a little bit more mature. So you're not going to show up and go, drink my face off and then go to P. Why the hell would I'm an athlete. I mean, there's a lot of people who want to be a military athlete, and drinking tons or smoking your face off or whatever it is, that's not where you're at. And indeed, you could show up pretty educated. And so the good old days, not the good old days, I'm being facetious here. Officers were educated, soldiers were like, whatever. I met soldiers that have a doctorate, and they're just like, hey, man, I just didn't want to be a doctorate and be in a lab forever. I hear the soldering stuff's really cool, so I came to do that. So to think I'm smarter than you, no, not at all. We have a very capable, very mature regiment across the serving and the association, and how do you leverage all that? So I think those are just some examples of the culture that I've seen change. You'll hear, somebody once told me that there's like Egyptian hieroglyphics that said something to the effect of, young people these days, they're weak and they don't work very hard. You hear that all the time, but I served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I've got friends buried near here. It's called Beechwood Cemetery. It's our national military cemetery. They fought, they died just as much as anybody else did in World War I. I got a grandfather that served in World War I, World War II. We have young Canadians that are just as prepared to risk themselves, serve their country, and I don't think that has changed. Now, you have to explain it to them. Anybody go and charge into that machine gun fire. Okay, sir, just give me a second here. I gotcha. I know that's my job. I'm in the infantry, but you can just lay it out for me about how you're going to make sure I'm just not sacrificed in vain. That is totally cool. And, we're all infantry soldiers here. There's a time for discussion and there's a time to go get after it. But I think that is something that equally has changed as you get these more mature, educated people. Explain it to them. And if you can explain to a young Canadian why they need to do something that's risky or away from their family or is going to, like, you know, damage themselves, because like my knees and ankles and lower back, like everybody else on the podcast here, aren't as good as they used to be. If you can explain that to them, those people are going to do it. So I think some cultural things have changed, but some have probably remained the same.
Sir, that's well said. You know, I find it in myself when I'm dealing with subordinates, and especially when you're dealing with different branches of service and different trades, right? Because we have our own kind of cultural nuances being in the infantry and being very much more, I don't know how to phrase it, but like, as I would find it a little bit more of the obedience culture of just going with it and saying, Roger that, this is the circumstances, let's go do the thing. And so I found that like explaining the why really emphasizes your leadership capacity to empower your subordinates, right? And just getting them to understand why we're doing this, and you communicating that in an effective manner, ideally. You know, you're fostering that sense of dedication in the member of seeing this task all the way through and getting that buy-in from the individual versus a very transactional, maybe dynamic where it's just like, go do this because I told you so.
Well, and Sergeant, if I can riff off that, I mean, so number one, when you've got educated, experienced people that, like, you know, had a job or two before that, you know, if you go, okay, here's what we're going to do, my intent's to try to get this done, and they go, you know, Sergeant, I did this thing before, like, I got an idea, can you give me a little bit of time here and I'll come back to you? And you're like, yeah, okay. Like, get after it. Like, what do you got? Come and brief me. And like, who would not say yes to that when somebody's going to take a rock out of your rucksack and go, I got an idea. And then second of all is like, you know, people listening right now have got how many tours in Latvia and whatever else. Like, if you think you're going to show up in a foreign country and go, okay, let me tell you how this is going to work, that is not real life, man. Like, if they don't support you, and Latvians are fantastic hosts. I mean, they really are. Most of them speak English better than I do. What a wonderful people. But like, you don't just show up in somebody else's country with a bunch of guns and go, hey, I'm here to like bring peace and security. Like, we're working with them. They are enabling us. We are living on their territory. In many cases, our families are living amongst their families. You got to interact with them at their level. And so those are the kind of like things that I think we increasingly understand. You, number one, have people that are so mature, so educated, like, use that. And equally, you're going to need that. And who knows who speaks Latvian? And you're like, what? You speak Latvian? Like, fantastic. What a better way to engage with a local community than have somebody that speaks like Latvian with a Canadian accent, whatever the hell that is.
Yeah, well said, sir. Did you ever envision yourself making it to general?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, so I'm like a farm boy from Southern Ontario.
Where'd you grow up?
I didn't grow up on a farm, but I worked on farm. Well, you know where Port Hope is along the 401?
Yes.
So I'm just north of Port Hope.
Okay.
I was born in Oshawa. Yep, the Schwa.
Right.
So I was born in Oshawa, raised a little bit farther east, north of Port Hope. Went to Port Hope High School. Go Spartans. And went to military college mainly because it was like, what? Free education? That sounds cool. Not like I had a problem for money, but it was just like, hey, that sounds cool. And I don't know, here I am like 36 years later, still serving because I want to, because I like it, because I enjoy serving Canadians. You just keep doing stuff, and then once in a while they go, hey, got a promotion for you and got, you know, harder job, etc. And you're like, right on, let's do that. You know, and hopefully you're cool and continue to command and do, you know, get to work with fantastic people. I hope most of us are not so dumb that like, this is the job. Like, this is the one I've got to do because I'm not smart enough. I'm sure you, Sergeant, are not like that. I'm not like that. I'm here because I want to. And I've had an excellent career. They keep sending me back to go get less dumb by getting me more education. I think I'm up to 60 countries I've visited around the world now.
That's incredible.
Job, but just other opportunities. I mean, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, 1 in Croatia, where you just get to see what's going on and try to help. And now I think this is a really interesting job where I get to talk to the Chief of Defense Staff sometimes, the Deputy Minister. I tend to travel with the Minister from time to time. What a great guy. It's fabulous. And if I didn't still want to do that and didn't think I could contribute, yeah, I would have gone on to something else. But
did you ever think about it, sir?
Farm kid from Southern Ontario that stayed around.
Did it ever cross your mind that, you know, maybe you want to get out or transition into another field? And like, how did you kind of like go through that process?
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I'll be pretty clear. Like, so let me think. So I got promoted captain. Oh, geez, 97. I think that's right. And posted to the infantry school a little bit after that. And so, no, sorry, posted captain 96. Year later, posted to the infantry school. Cool. So I spent 4 years in the infantry school. That's a long time. And, we're working my way up in the infantry school. And then I got posted over to 2 RCR to be a LAV captain. And I was like, what? Like, LAV captain's kind of junior, really? That's what you think of me. Huh. Okay. Well, stick around until I get something else. But I was like putting out CVs, getting ready to move on. And then another opportunity came around that was like, no, we actually think you've got something to do else. And I was like, okay, great. And then equally, a couple times in my career, I've just kind of bumped into this thing where you come back and they kind of shrug your shoulders and go, I don't know, we got nothing for you. And you're like, oh, okay, let me look what else is going on. But I got to admit, my heart was never in it. I enjoy what we do. I enjoy serving Canadians. I enjoy being in the infantry. Last time I leopard crawled or jumped in a trench is a couple years, you'll understand. But still, like that's cool stuff. And I enjoy talking to soldiers and being around and serving Canadians like that. I think we all have other things. And I think that's healthy. Like, you shouldn't just be saying, going, I've got to serve, because that's what I have to do. I hope we're all smart enough, motivated enough, have enough skill sets. And I think you do, from what you've learned in your military career, to go do something else and serve Canadians in another way.
Awesome. Sir, when you look back at your career, you served at 1 RCR, I believe you said, 2 RCR and 3 RCR. And did you find any kind of differences among the battalions? Do you have any kind of opinion on the matter of being in the different battalions?
Yeah, there totally is a bit of okay. And again, 1 RCR was like 93, 97, so that was a couple of years ago. 2 RCR, I was there for like 6 months. I was at the infantry school, moved over to 2 RCR, and then they posted me here to Ottawa to do a job, be an aide for the army commander at the time. And then 3, I was there from 2003 to 2006, being the operations officer for the first tour into Kabul, and then para company commander. So again, bit dated here, but so the mech battalions, as you know, like that takes a lot of work to maintain a LAV and maintain the skills to communicate from it and drive it and crew command it and be a gunner in it. Like, that is some serious skill set that you got to spend a lot of time on. And so that is what you need to do. The light battalions, your fitness to me is part of your operational capability. And so you got to get out there and keeping it real and protecting your body. You got to get out there and be super fit, because you are probably either jumping out of an airplane, jumping out of a helicopter, jumping out of some small vehicle and doing a lot of humping with a lot of weight on your back. You've got to maintain your body that can do that. And if I say to you, Sergeant, as part of this company attack, we're going to do a 25K approach march. And if you go, whoa, yeah, I've never done that before. That is impossible. There is no way me and my soldiers are going to get that done. Well, then I can't do that anymore. You have now excluded one of my kind of options that I was going to do operationally. But if you go, yeah, I've done that with my soldiers a lot of times. And, we need to have a break in a couple spots, get some water, food, whatever. But we're on to that. There's skill sets. There are a lot of skill sets, as you know very well, from light battalions, be them parachute related, helicopter related, any of the mountain skill sets. There's a lot of things you have to maintain, but fitness is physically one part of the things that is your operational capability. And I'm not saying the mech battalions don't have some fantastically fit women and men. They do. But to me, light battalions had a very special need to be fit, because that was part of your operational capability. And then the cultures reflect that. If you're in a mech battalion, your ability to gun, shoot, drive, that's important. And hopefully that's rewarded for who's better at that. If you're in a light battalion, fitness is super important. And it should be celebrated when you've got a really fit person that is also whatever, parachute instructor, mountain ops, whatever it is tremendously important. Now, they share skills. They're all important, but there are some differences that, and they reflect what is important for those units.
Right on, sir. Oh man, this is getting hard because there's so many things I want to talk about with such a little amount of time. Okay, how do I start? Sir, when you think back at your career, does anybody in particular come up where you would mention that they had a huge amount of influence in you becoming who you are today? If they helped influence a lot of character development in your life?
Yeah, it takes a village, right? So it's not like it's not one person, but you know, like, and it's not like, oh, my company commander, my commanding officer. Like, you know, even I can remember way back in the day. So I showed up in 1 RCR Bravo Company back in 1993. Pretty fit dude, I think, and fit soldiers there too. But working hard. They just got back from Bosnia not too much before that. And I think I was the only platoon commander as an officer there at the time. So there was a warrant in charge of one, another had a sergeant. And I could just remember kind of being taken aside at one point going, sir, and just kind of giving me the, don't do that. Like, that's just not cool. And like, that's the stuff we need, as a young officer. I needed that kind of like, I've only been around for 25 years in the infantry, but let me tell you about how we work together within a company or how you should treat your soldiers. Like, we young officers learn so much from your first warrant officer. It's almost like your legendary first relationship is with your warrant officer. And hopefully you have a great one. Usually you do. You don't always. And they just kind of sit you down and go, hey, I work for you. You got that? Like, I work for you. There's one boss in this platoon, and that's you. But I have a lot of experience. I can provide you with a lot of advice. And if you're smart as a young officer, you listen to that. And same thing, you go up and at some point you're a company commander and you hopefully have a fantastic sergeant major that is probably fairly close to you in level of experience. Like, he's probably a bit older, bit more experienced, spent whole time in battalion or something close to it. You've gone off and done different jobs, but they are a huge source of knowledge and advice. And I've got to work with fantastic ones. I'd bring up as an example, Stu Hartnell, Master Warrant Officer at the time, Chief Warrant Officer, moved on up, Chief Warrant Officer, Sergeant Major of the Army. A guy that just fantastic level of knowledge, and I got to work with him for a year. Fit guy, tremendous experience out of the Airborne Regiment, and just sitting there drinking that knowledge was tremendously useful for me as like a young company commander. And equally moving on up to be, again, I went off to SOF to command at unit level. I wouldn't say I haven't had good experience from like officers that have helped me, but equally, because I work here in National Defense Headquarters, the public service. They are not military. They are not soldiers, but they have tremendous experience and they understand how Ottawa works. And we military folks would serve the nation much, much better if we listen to them about, yeah, I got what you want to do, but here's how we're going to have to talk within Ottawa to get that moving forward. It's not just about defense. It's also about central agencies and finance and Global Affairs Canada that's in charge of what Canada's doing in the world. We got to talk to all those different organizations. You would learn a lot and be very well served to take their advice because they have their experience and you should use that. So I'd say like, yep, definitely a lot of NCOs were very patient with me. Gave me that, wise talk of like, sir, that's not how we do it here. This is how it works. And you go ahead, do whatever you want. Like, you're in charge. You want to run off and do great stuff with your platoon and piss everybody off. Eventually your company commander is probably going to get talked to by the sergeant major and he'll go, listen, man, you're doing a great job with your platoon, but like your NCOs hate you. And this is why, and like, you don't have to be hated here. I'm still wanting you to like get after the stuff I'm giving you, but here's how you can work with your NCOs because they are such a fantastic level of knowledge and experience. Hopefully young officers understand that when they show up, but sometimes they need some hard advice from either their company commander or an NCO that's not afraid to give them some hard advice about like, listen, sir, we'll do whatever you want, or ma'am for that matter, but here's how we can do that better for you.
Well said, sir. When I look at officer careers, I can't help but think that, if you make it to where you're at, being somebody as a 2-star general and being at that level, I find that there's only a few positions that you have to be involved in a tactical element. And with that being said, it's very important to have a very strong relationship dynamic with your platoon, with your company, your NCOs, they make up the bulk of the workforce that'll be under you. And I found that that time frame from a junior officer to be essentially what I perceive to be nurtured to some extent by their warrant officer is so important for their growth. And it can give them a lot of perspective. And, Major Downey said it in an interesting way. He said, how a platoon is structured, and to the capacity of a platoon, they are capable of carrying on if the officer isn't there. But he said that, a platoon doesn't need an officer, but a junior officer needs a platoon. And it's kind of interesting how he put it. And I understand how important it is for that dynamic, because especially looking at you now, over 20 years, into the military where you're at, you're not with us on the ground anymore. So all your experiences with NCOs have allowed you to grow into the leader that you are today and help you make the decisions that you make today based off of those experiences. And I found it difficult being in the battalion when I saw that constraints of manning, and the officers came in, they did their baseline, and then they moved on to the next role. And I didn't know if there's any way to preserve that influential time that they have to be in that position for at least a year. But it was so hard to see somebody coming in for the job for 6 months. Maybe you're in a deployment window. Maybe it's a low activity period in the battalion. Maybe your platoon is at half strength, and I just found that interesting.
It's certain. I'd riff off your point that as an example, when I took over my company Para, as they called it, in 3 RCR, I was there for 2 years because at the time the Army commander had directed company commanders will do the job for 2 years. I think I was the only leader that stayed 2 years in that organization.
Wow,
That's
a long time.
Through. Well, hey, it gives me an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Do some excellent exercises. Wasn't a big company at the time. I think we were 70 and a bit, which is all we could throw out of an aircraft most of the time. Sergeant Major rotated through, platoon commanders, company 2IC, all rotated through. But at least I was there. And, sometimes you're dealing with soldiers that have got stuff you want to help them with. Well, if you're there for 6 months, I'd love to say most problems can be solved in 6 months. That's not always true. Being there for 2 months, helping somebody, that's what it takes. And equally from a learning perspective, 2 years, that's pretty good versus 6 months, got the check, off you go. That's one of the best jobs in the world is being a company commander. I've got to imagine section commander is one of the best jobs in the world. To do it for 6 months and then move, come on.
I would love to be a sergeant in para company for the rest of my career if I could, airborne.
Use it for other stuff. Do that.
Sir, you're a very busy person in the role that you're in right now, and I know you have a tight schedule. So I want to give you an opportunity. If you have any final words you would like to share before we end our awesome interview, please fire away.
Yeah, no, Sergeant. First of all, thanks. Thanks for this opportunity. I salute you for what you're doing. I think it's tremendously important we communicate within the regiment, and we're working on it. We're working to try to communicate with how people want to communicate now. And again, we've probably got 18-year-old soldier to 80-plus-year-old retired person. Whatever that communication method is, we got to find all that so that we can do that. So thank you. I think this is a very good method. I'd reinforce 2 points. Number one, there is something up here called the Regimental Senate, and it's got a structure. And frankly, we're trying to serve the regiment the best we can so that it is well positioned within Canada, well positioned within the Canadian Armed Forces, and frankly is serving the regiment how it needs to. And that's why I wasn't talking about, hey, I hear there's a new rifle we should all get. That's not my business. That's the chain of command. They'll do that stuff. Shoot, move, communicate. That's them. Got great leaders that will do that stuff. But from a languages, because someday you're going to need it, from a professional development, from a regimental communication, professional development, that's the kind of stuff I try to get involved in. But there are a lot of smart people out there. And if you've got ideas, I want to hear them because I think there's a lot of other stuff that we could get after there that you're no, this is an institutional level thing that we as a regiment need to deal with. And come on, General, let's do that too. I'd be happy to listen to that and pass that on to the person that's going to replace me eventually here. And then the second thing is, we got this association. And again, I get the fact that what 80-year-old retirees want to do versus somebody that's 25, did a basic engagement. That's cool. I'm out. I want to go off and do something else. But maybe want to stick around. Want to still have that camaraderie that wants to spill beer on other people from time to time and tell them about their tour, their exercise. I'd encourage people to stick around, and force us to make sure that we're communicating with you effectively so that we can have a retired group that like are active as they want to be. And I think it's sad if we like create big regimental stuff that's like, get your mess kit out, and you don't want to do that. Like, how can we give you something that's what you want to do too? And you'll make the drive to Petawawa or go to your local chapter of the association and stay active and stay community and maybe contribute. I just encourage everybody to do that. And if you don't think you can based on what the association is right now, I know they're working on it, and I'd love to hear from you that as well. But again, Sergeant, thanks very much for this opportunity, and thanks everybody for listening.
Hey, thank you, sir. And just final words from me. This has been an awesome privilege to be somebody from the Infantry Battalion serving in Para Company, somewhere where you have a legacy history in and are still, you know, spoken about by the DSM, who was one of your soldiers in Para Company. So this is amazing to be able to have this this opportunity, you know. And I hope in the future we get another chance to speak again and engage and discuss more about the regiment and your thoughts on it. And so once again, sir, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. My whole crew here is very honored to have had this opportunity. And Pro Patria, sir, thank you.
Yeah, like Sergeant, Pro Patria yourself. And listen, first of all, thanks for what you're doing. And you know, I'm pumped to be able to talk to a bunch of soldiers again. I don't get to do that very often. So like, all the best to you and everybody up in Petawawa and all the listeners. Thanks very much.
Airborne, sir.